I was in grade 7, I remember doing a unit on Japan in social studies. And while I don't remember all of the details, I remember learning in class that Japan was a unique and exotic country that was half the size of Alberta but had over 3 times the population of Canada. In school, I was taught that Japan had a strong, unique, and vibrant culture that had ancient spiritual traditions, developed economies, proud culinary traditions, and a peaceful and hospitable people. Decades later, I had the opportunity to see if everything they said in the textbooks were true. And you know what? They were. Everything I read about Japan back in junior high was true. This was my first trip to Asia, and relatively speaking, Japan is easy to get to from Alberta. From Edmonton, it's one quick plane ride to Vancouver and then a direct flight from Vancouver to Narita International Airport in Tokyo. I flew with Air Canada and it was a wonderful trip. Now, my son Henry, who loves learning about airplane models, is going to tell you all about the plane I flew to Japan.
Here I am to talk about the plane my dad flew on. Most Ave geeks or aviation lovers call it the 777-300ER. By Boeing, Boeing is the number 2 company in the aviation company ranking. Airbus is the number 1 company in aviation. Back to the 777-300ER, it is the number 5 safest long-range airliner. It is also known for its snow resistance. The 777X is Boeing's latest project after the 777-300ER. And with that, this is the end of my info. Thank you for listening and have a good one.
When I arrived in Tokyo, I immediately began to explore. I had a bus take me from the airport to a bus station near Kabuchiko, which is the entertainment district located in Shinjuku, which is a special ward of Tokyo. What quickly becomes obvious to you is that Tokyo is busy and has a lot of energy. I knew it would, but it's one thing to expect the energy, but it's another thing to experience it. Tokyo has over 13 million people living in it, and all of them are working, walking, taking a train, going to school, eating, and they all do it quickly because everything happens on time in Japan. While in Japan, 95% of my transportation was on trains, which was the easiest and most convenient way to get around. Now, I've been through train stations before, New York, London, and Chicago, so I thought I'd be okay. But Shinjuku Station in Tokyo was like nothing I had ever experienced. Shinjuku is the busiest train station in the world. It has over 200 entrances, 53 different train platforms, and is used by nearly 4 million people every day. It was overwhelming at first, and I'd be lying if I said I was able to figure it out right away. Eventually, though, I did get used to the train system and learned to appreciate it. Of course, with a little help from some friends. After a few days, I eventually got used to the train system and found it easy to navigate. I've always enjoyed taking trains, and I enjoy traveling to cities that have them. While in Japan, I bought a 7-day Japan Rail Pass, which allowed me to use any train system managed by the JR company, which was always identified as a green line on all of the train station maps. I also used my JR Pass to ride the world-famous Shinkansen, the Japanese bullet train that took me from Tokyo to Osaka in about 3 hours. I rode the Hikari line that traveled just over 280 kilometers an hour. Easily the fastest train ride I've ever taken. This is also a country that maintains a wonderful tension of quality and quantity. There's a lot of everything in Japan. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of buildings, trains, experiences, and yes, a great deal of food. Normally, when you travel to a place that has a lot of things, there's usually some kind of compromise when it comes to quality. In Japan, it seemed as though there was a cultural value around having things done well and getting as close as they could to perfection. The streets were kept very clean. There is little to no litter in most places I visited. I don't want to come off as some kind of expert on Japan because I'm certainly not. I've only visited the country for about 9 full days. But I can certainly tell you what I experienced in terms of the people and culture. And what I observed is that the people of Japan are incredibly disciplined. They also know how to have a lot of fun. For example, how about driving a go-kart through the streets of Tokyo? As a lifelong gamer, I've always thought it would be cool to drive through a busy street like you can if you're playing Mario Kart on Nintendo. In Japan, you can do this in real life, and I had a blast driving a small go-kart through traffic in Shibuya in Tokyo. I highly recommend it. So much fun. An observation I'd like to make here is that I found Japan to be a country that you can fully experience with all of your senses. The cities are strikingly beautiful, and all of them have their own visual identity. And like most cultures, there's a unique commitment to design, architecture, and the arts. The Japanese do things with excellence on a grand scale, but they also craft with precision on smaller things. For example, it's easy to find a perfect cup of coffee in Japan. One of the many things that I liked about Japan is that it seemed to be a country that is both fierce and peaceful at the same time. The streets are bustling with energy, and at times places like Tokyo or Osaka can feel overwhelming. But at the same time, these powerful cities do show restraint by making space for peace, contemplation, and honoring traditions. During my trip, the best examples of peace were found in Kyoto. And honestly, if there's one regret from this trip, it's that I was not able to spend more time in Kyoto. It was relaxing just to be there, exploring gardens, shrines, and the many canals that make their way through the city. While in Tokyo, I visited Team Lab's Tokyo Planets, an immersive art installation where you can interact with art in a physical space that engages your senses of sight, sound, touch, and smell. In order to experience it, you must go in barefoot because many of the art installations involve the experience of water. It was a very moving experience, and I did my best to take my time as I experienced this amazing art. The food is incredibly delicious, inviting, and affordable. While in Tokyo, I visit Omoide Yokocho, which used to be a black market during the World War II era. There you'll find a small maze of alleys that are full of izakayas and small food stalls. This is a wonderful place to experience some tasty small dishes, grilled food, and drinks. It's very safe, of course, and the lively stall owners and narrow alleyways make it fun for everyone. I spent 3 nights in Osaka. Osaka is a lot of fun. There are many interesting sights to take in here, like Osaka Castle, one of Japan's most famous landmarks that has been occupied since the late 16th century. I also visited a very beautiful and modern structure. This is the Umeda Sky Building, an architectural marvel with a floating circular observatory on the 39th floor. And just like Tokyo, it was fun and vibrant at night. There were even more opportunities to enjoy great street food in Osaka, where I got to try okonomiyaki, which is essentially a pancake filled with vegetables like cabbage, corn, pork belly, and covered with okonomiyaki sauce, Japanese mayonnaise, and bonito flakes. Absolutely delicious. I do enjoy exploring a city at night. I felt like I was a character in a science fiction movie, and I'm grateful to have had the chance to visit Osaka. A trip to Japan would also not be complete without enjoying some bowls of ramen or udon noodles. For sure, you can find a good bowl of ramen back home, but there is something special about enjoying food in its country of origin. If it was lunchtime and I was at a major train station, I would often find myself a soup restaurant and buy myself a bowl of soup and quickly take it in. It is true that in Japan, ramen is slurped, which I found highly satisfying. That said, the soup is piping hot, and I burned myself. A lot. But totally worth it. When it was time for me to come home, I have to admit, I felt a bit sad. I really enjoyed my trip to Japan, but it was time to go home. When I was in grade 7, I would have never imagined that I would get the chance to visit the land of the rising sun. One of the reasons I enjoy traveling so much is because I always feel like I come home having learned something important. In Japan, I was impressed and challenged by the idea that some extremes can coexist at the same time. An intense, busy city can also have spaces of peace and tranquility. A culture that has many rules, norms, and etiquette can also be fierce in art, food, and fun. And in Japan, excellence can be enjoyed in the small aspects of life, but also in things of large design. It always doesn't have to be one or the other. Would I go back to Japan? Absolutely. Until next time, sayonara.